On Monday morning, Maria Santos walked into Blackstone Industries for what she knew would be her last day as an invisible filing clerk. In her bag, she carried a flash drive containing evidence that would destroy the careers of some of the most powerful executives in the building. More importantly, she carried the knowledge that she was about to prevent a massive environmental disaster and protect thousands of innocent people. Attorney Rebecca Martinez had filed the official complaints with federal agencies over the weekend. By noon, EPA investigators and SEC enforcement officers would arrive at Blackstone with search warrants and subpoenas. The storm that had been building for weeks was finally ready to break. But Maria had one final piece of business to complete first. At exactly 9:30 a.m., she walked into the executive conference room where Marcus Hartwell was conducting the weekly senior staff meeting. The same room where she had accidentally overheard the conversation that started everything 3 weeks earlier. This time, her presence was no accident. "Excuse me," she said, stepping into the room with a confidence that made every executive look up in surprise. "I need to speak with Mr. Hartwell." Hartwell's face darkened with annoyance. "Maria, isn't it? You need to leave immediately. This is a private meeting." "Actually, this concerns everyone in this room," Maria replied, setting a manila folder on the conference table. "I thought you should know that federal investigators will be arriving here in about 2 hours with search warrants related to environmental fraud and securities violations." The room erupted in shocked voices and angry demands for security. But Hartwell held up his hand for silence, his eyes fixed on Maria with a mixture of rage and disbelief. "You have no idea what you're doing," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Do you understand who you're dealing with? We will destroy you." Maria smiled calmly. "Mr. Hartwell, you've been trying to destroy me for 3 weeks. The threats, the intimidation, the security consultants watching my every move. But here's what you never understood. I stopped being afraid of you the moment I realized that protecting innocent people was more important than protecting my job." She opened the folder and pulled out a document. "This is a copy of the complaint I've filed with the EPA regarding your plan to hide environmental contamination at the Wisconsin facility and transfer liability to Tech Flow Solutions. This," she said, producing another document, "is the SEC complaint regarding securities fraud in connection with the merger." Sharon Webb from legal grabbed the documents and began reading frantically. Maria watched the color drain from her face as she realized the scope of the evidence. "You recorded private conversations," Webb accused. "That's illegal wiretapping." "Actually, it's not," Maria replied. "I consulted with environmental attorneys who specialize in whistleblower protections. Recording conversations in common areas where there's no reasonable expectation of privacy is completely legal. Your phone call with TechFlow, for example, took place in Mr. Hartwell's office with the door open while you were on speakerphone. Anyone walking down the hallway could have heard it." Hartwell stood up slowly, his face red with fury. "You think you're very clever, don't you? A little filing clerk playing detective. But you have no idea what you've just done to yourself. We will sue you into bankruptcy. We will make sure you never work anywhere ever again. When we're finished with you, you'll wish you had minded your own business." For 8 years, threats like that would have terrified Maria into submission. But now she looked at Hartwell with something that shocked everyone in the room: pity. "Mr. Hartwell, do you know what I've learned over the past 3 weeks? I've learned that I'm not just a little filing clerk. I'm a business student with 8 years of experience in corporate operations and a detailed understanding of environmental law. I'm a person who uncovered one of the largest environmental fraud schemes in state history. And I'm someone who had the courage to do what was right even when powerful people tried to intimidate me into staying quiet." She picked up her folder and headed for the door, then paused to look back at the stunned executives. "Oh, and one more thing. TechFlow's board of directors received copies of all this evidence this morning. They've already called off the merger. I thought you should know before the stock market opens." Maria walked out of the conference room and directly to the elevator. Behind her, she could hear shouting voices and the sound of someone screaming for security. But it was too late. The storm had already been released, and there was nothing they could do to stop it now. 2 hours later, Maria sat in the lobby of a federal building across town, watching news reports on her phone as FBI agents and EPA investigators carried boxes of evidence out of Blackstone Industries. The company's stock price had crashed when news of the federal investigation broke, and trading had been suspended pending further developments. Attorney Martinez sat beside her, fielding phone calls from reporters who wanted to interview the whistleblower who had exposed the scandal. But Maria had insisted on remaining anonymous for now. She wanted to see how the legal process unfolded before she decided whether to go public with her identity. The EPA is calling this one of the most significant environmental fraud cases they've seen, Martinez told her after hanging up with a federal prosecutor. The contamination at the Wisconsin plant is worse than even you suspected. Groundwater testing shows chemical levels that could have caused serious health problems for the entire surrounding community. Maria felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She was proud that she had prevented a disaster, but she was also shocked by how close innocent families had come to being poisoned by corporate greed. What happens now, she asked. Federal grand jury investigations, criminal charges against the executives involved, and probably the largest environmental fine in state history, Martinez replied. The SEC is also pursuing securities fraud charges related to the merger attempt. Marcus Hartwell and several others are likely looking at prison time. That evening, Maria returned to her apartment for the first time in weeks without the weight of secrets pressing down on her shoulders. She had lost her job, but she had gained something much more valuable, the knowledge that she was capable of standing up to powerful people and fighting for what was right. Her phone rang just as she was making dinner. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize. "Is this Maria Santos?" asked a professional-sounding woman's voice. "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Catherine Williams. I'm the CEO of Environmental Justice Partners, a nonprofit organization that investigates corporate environmental crimes. I was wondering if you might be interested in discussing a job opportunity." Maria was stunned. "How did you get my number?" "Rebecca Martinez gave it to me with your permission. We've been following the Blackstone case, and we're impressed by your investigative work and your commitment to environmental protection. We think you might be exactly the kind of person we need on our team." 6 months later, Maria Santos stood before a congressional committee investigating corporate environmental crimes, telling her story to a room full of lawmakers and reporters. She wore a professional business suit and spoke with the confidence of someone who had discovered her true calling. The investigation she had started had led to criminal convictions for 5 Blackstone executives, including Marcus Hartwell, who received a 4-year prison sentence. The company had been forced to pay $200 million in environmental fines and cleanup costs. Most importantly, the contaminated Wisconsin facility was being properly remediated, and the affected community was receiving medical monitoring and compensation. "The most important thing I learned from this experience," Maria told the committee, "is that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they decide to stand up for what's right. For 8 years, I thought I was just a small person in a big corporation who didn't matter. But it turns out that sometimes the smallest person in the room is the one who can create the biggest change." After the hearing, reporters crowded around her asking about her transformation from filing clerk to environmental crusader. Maria smiled as she answered their questions, thinking about how wrong everyone had been about her capabilities. They had assumed she was weak because she was quiet. They had assumed she was powerless because she was polite. They had assumed she would stay silent because she was afraid. But Maria Santos had learned something that her former colleagues never understood. Sometimes the most dangerous storms begin with the softest whisper. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are wielded by the people others dismiss as harmless. And sometimes the greatest courage comes from the quiet person who finally decides they've had enough. The executives at Blackstone Industries had made the mistake of underestimating a filing clerk who turned out to be a force of nature. They thought they knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of doing. They had never been more wrong about anything in their lives. Maria Santos had indeed released a storm, But it wasn't the kind of storm that destroys everything in its path. It was the kind of storm that clears the air, washes away corruption, and leaves the world cleaner and safer for everyone. It was the kind of storm that proves ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they find the courage to fight. And in her new office at Environmental Justice Partners, surrounded by case files and evidence boxes, Maria Santos continued to create storms wherever corporate criminals thought they could hide their crimes from a quiet woman who had learned to roar.